Hi, thanks for tuning in to quarantine project number 4. I've decided to make some barn door style sliding window shutters for my front room. First step is to measure the window. It's 70 inches wide by 50 inches tall. Next step is to draw up some plans and figure out the materials required. I've decided to make it out of 1x8 tongue and groove board for the main body, and I'm going to use 1x6 Douglas fir for all of the cross supports. After erroneously assuming the width of 1x8 tongue and groove, this is my revised plan that had to include an extra plank. 1x8 tongue and groove, FYI, is actually a little bit more like just over 6.5 inches. Due to warps and flaws in the wood, after gathering all of the supplies, the next step is to actually lay out the pieces and make sure that the tongue and groove edges actually connect with each other. You'll notice that on the very edges, I picked the pieces with the most flaws to be my side pieces because we're going to be cutting those off anyways. Dealing with imperfect boards, you might have to play with the configuration a little bit to make sure that the pieces contour to each other the way that you want. Also, make sure that your cross supports contour to the wood to give you the desired outcome. Once you've got all that figured out, you're going to pull the pieces apart, pour wood glue into the grooves, and then reconnect. The next step is staining. We used a Kona wood stain on all of the pieces on our first panel, including the cross supports. And ideally, you want to stain all of the pieces before screwing them all together, just so you don't have excess stain accumulating in the cracks. So the next step is to screw on the cross supports. Once you have that first layer of stain down, we're going to go 3.5 inches from the top and the bottom, centering it horizontally. So there's about a 2-inch gap at the end of each cross support. We'll sand the whole panel down with 120 grit sandpaper to bring out the wood grain features. Next step is to use a table saw to cut off the extra couple of inches on either side of the panel so they are flush with the ends of the cross supports. It's not quite the color that I was going for, so I had to add a thin coat of weathered gray stain to mute out the warm tones and give it more of an ashy look. And then I used 120 grit sandpaper to get rid of the excess and bring out the wood grain again. Next, I used a miter saw to cut another 1x6 to go diagonally between the top and bottom cross supports. Then I stained it to match the rest of the panel and attached it to the main body using screws. We're going to put this piece aside and do the same thing on our second panel. On this panel, I decided to cut the extra width off of our edge planks before gluing the whole thing together. It's a little bit easier to manipulate the wood that way through the table saw. Then we're going to add glue into the grooves again, attach it all together, stain it with both stains that we used on the first panel, sand it down with 120 grit sandpaper, screw in the cross supports at the top and bottom, add the diagonal pieces, and then we're almost done with our panel. I waited until I ordered the hardware to attach these top corner pieces just because I wanted to make sure I got the width right and the hardware wouldn't hang over the edge. It looked like a 1x6 by 3.5 would work for that, so I cut those down to size, stained them, and screwed them into the top corners of our panels. And now we're ready to attach our hardware. So this is the hardware kit that I ordered off of Amazon, and unfortunately the instructions were pretty vague, but it's still pretty straightforward, so I should be able to attach it without any problem. This is what it looks like after attaching all of the hardware to the doors. And the final step is to attach the rail system to the wall. After seeing these side by side with the hardware attached, before I hang them on the rails, I'm going to flip one of the diagonal cross supports so they're facing opposite direction. To support the rail system, I've decided to use a 1 by 10 by 12 foot board that I will screw the rail system to. Before we do that, we're going to need to sand it down and stain it with the Kona stain, and then sand it down again so it matches the rest of the wood that we've been using for this project. The next step is going to be to attach the headboard to the wall studs. The board is pretty heavy, so use a couple of pieces of wood to hold it up in place while you secure it in. And finally, you can attach the rails and spacers to the headboard using lag bolts. Then you can hang your doors and make any other necessary adjustments that you need to do in order for the doors to slide smoothly. Unfortunately, on mine, the nut on the back of the door hardware was catching on the headboard, so I had to inset that a little bit into the wood on the back of the doors. After making that adjustment, quarantine project number 4 is complete. Thanks for watching.